Hi, Julie.
Hi there.
Welcome.
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. So you got a lot of people today. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We're gonna give it a few minutes for the rest of the subgroup to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, Mia.
Hi.
We're waiting on just a couple more people, but we have Pike. And I know Shriram said that he's gonna be 10 minutes late. Um, so we'll give it just a few more and then get started.
Sure. I will do some basic agenda setting, and then I'll probably turn that over to you, Ashira, because that I think worked last time when Dominic was doing it, just so I can participate and not try to manage the flow of conversation.
Sounds good.
Great.
And just so everyone knows, Ben won't be here this week. He's on vacation, so I'll be filling in on his behalf for the department. Henry Mock, I'm an attorney for the department working on the Clean Heat Standard.
Hi, Henry.
Thank And I think we may be able to get started because the only person we'd be waiting on is Shriram.
I'm sorry, did Matt say he was coming?
Matt is not on this invitation.
Oh, that's too bad. I don't know if I missed it when I told Catherine. That might be my fault. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Um,
Um,
Could we email the invitation to him right now and just be like, if there's a chance you can come, that would be great. I'm sorry, maybe I didn't tell Catherine who to send that poll to correctly.
no worries. Yeah, I'll go ahead and send that to him now.
Yeah, and just say like if he happens to be free, otherwise I can catch him up. And I expect these discussions will be ongoing. Sorry about that if that was me. No, I told Catherine, I was just looking at the email that Matt was part of the group, so I don't know where he fell off that list, but that's okay. Yeah, no problem. Pike, are you able to join us on camera? Otherwise, I feel like it's going to be me talking to myself a little bit on this one, and Henry. Hey, Pike.
Hello.
Okay, well, in the interim, I will just get this started. So to recap briefly, so we had left it where we got I think reasonable consensus on a few different issues of credit ownership for installed measures for this subgroup and then for the full working group. That was sort of, I did my best to turn that consensus into a memo, which I have sent to Dominic and he has transmitted to the PUC. Hi, Matt. Sorry for the confusion. Thanks for joining us. Okay. So sorry. So I sent around a version of that, credit memo. I think that was transmitted to this group. If anyone doesn't have it, let me know. So that sort of reflects where we are. And we acknowledge in that memo that there are some sort of outstanding issues. Now, since that time, Dominic responded to the group saying that the credit ownership feedback is actually due May 7th, sort of later than we had anticipated. But I'd like to build on rather than going back to the drawing board for things we've already agreed on. So I'm hopeful that what we could do today is take up any issues that we sort of passed off that are related to credit ownership, see if we can develop any consensus and sort of do it all again, which is bringing this group's consensus to the full group and seeing if there's something that the full EAG could agree on and provide sort of a part 2 memo for the PUC on credit ownership. It's a little messier than I would have liked, but I think the important thing is just getting feedback that we can all stand behind. And then the other thing that I heard from Dominic via the PUC is that they would like us to see if we could take the equity advisory framework that we've created, the rubric, and run through the clean heat credit ownership issues framework. And we're working with a few different ones because there's the straw proposal, there's the elements we have, but I think it's a good point that if we're creating this equity rubric, we should road test it on our own ideas. So I think it'll depend on kind of where we get during this, like what time would be appropriate to do that. But it's something for us to keep in mind that we should really see if we could examine our own ideas with that rubric. So yeah, so I think we should start with just sort of figuring out what's still on the table. And I'm now going to take a step back and turn that over to Ashira so she can facilitate and I can participate without getting in the way. Thanks, Ashira.
Thanks so much. And we have many members of the public here as well. So I just wanted to let you know that we will have public comment time. We generally do it after if there's any decision that's about to be made, we'll hold some time for public comment. And then in general, we have 10 minutes at the end for just general comment. We do ask that just so that everybody has a chance to be able to speak, that if you can keep your initial comments to under 2 minutes, and then if we have additional time, we can circle back to you for further comments. Okay, so would it make sense to go ahead? I have the credit ownership memo that Mia sent out, and I can go ahead and share my screen and also share a Google Doc for the members to be able to comment directly in. And there's Shriram. And from that, and I can explain a little bit about the process for that as well with open meeting laws. Generally, what we do is I go ahead and share the document so that everybody can see it. And then we will go ahead and close that document and make it a static document so that there's no one is able to edit it or continue to contribute past the time of the meeting itself. So that's where I'm thinking of heading, but I'd like to turn to the EAG members to see if that sounds like a good direction, a good starting point.
I think that sounds good, but just, yeah, with a focus of like things that we sort of don't yet have fully EAG consensus on to, spend the bulk of our energy. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I don't know that, I mean, we certainly can to sort of unpack this memo again, I'd kind of like us to focus our limited time on sort of things that we haven't gone over yet, but just to agenda set. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. So then I guess I'll open it up starting there. If there are any pieces of so you should already be pretty familiar with the credit ownership memo. So if there's any pieces that we want to kind of go ahead and source right now that are not in this that we can begin discussing. And then we can continue the discussion. So does anyone have a main topic that has yet to be discussed in the memo?
Hey, Shira, can you share the link in chat so I can open up on my computer?
Of course, thanks for reminding me.
So I think this group had gotten into information disclosures for delivered clean heat measures. I think there was a sort of ongoing discussion of what sort of pre-delivery disclosure and consent needed to happen. And I think I remember hearing that there was still some confusion from this group about, like, for me at least, what's practical and sort of what's possible, and sort of where it makes sense to intervene in that process. I think especially if we can focus on the suggestions that the PUC staff have already made in the straw proposal. I know we had the start of a good conversation of that last time. Any thoughts?
Yeah, one thought, I just highlighted the word transparent, and upon review of our rubric, I noticed that nowhere do we actually use the word transparent in the rubric, which I think is an oversight, given how often we talk about transparency in all of our other discussions. So I'd like to revisit the rubric at some point to include transparency as one of the measures.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I think I had last wanted to see that for any eligible measure, there was buy-in and consent from the end user. Srini suggested that might be difficult if folks are just pumping in biofuels into the mix generally. And I think that is something that could be dealt with. So I'll leave it at that. I think but that's where the last.
And
Oh, good. Sorry, I interrupt.
Shriram, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I was looking at I'm okay with the second paragraph, and I actually like Pike's suggestion of the transparency, I think. And I think Ben used three characteristics, I think. Simple, transparent, and fairness. Those are the three characteristics. So I think that that's consistent. The second paragraph, I think, is okay. On the third one, I wonder whether it's worth adding a different component. We talk about customers' credit ownerships will give customers negotiating power in their contractual agreements. But there is also another aspect. I think there is an aspect of motivation to do something. And today, without having the ability to have something, of material value that belongs to you, or something that can be monetized. I think a lot of people, without even on the added complexity of not enough education, they just have no motivation to pursue these things. So I think having a credit that belongs to you, I think it's a significant motivational aspect, I think, for the end customers to actually do something, start the conversation with the service provider, or the equipment provider, and actually do something going forward. So I think the motivational aspect should be emphasized with the credits belonging to the property owner.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that this has been sent to the PUC already. I haven't filed it because I was anticipating a part 2, but Dominic has sent this to staff. So I think we should think of things that are additive rather than corrections, unless we see there's a serious mistake, just because it's been transmitted just based on the assumption that we're on a time frame. Yeah, so just to be clear. But I think there's plenty of room in another memo to add.
Yeah, I think what I suggested could work as an add-on, not as a correction. Yeah, thanks.
Great, just to be clear.
Okay, is there any reaction to that? Is everyone pretty much in agreement?
For me, I think my brain is a little slower than all of you. I need to both read. I can't read and listen to comments at the same time, so I'm gonna have to just read a bit. I don't know if Matt can help here, but it would be helpful for me to understand the economics of the fuel. It sounds like, and I don't know if it's the case all the time, but it sounds like biofuels are already blended with fossil fuels. I don't know if there's a standard mix. I don't know if that's with every delivery. And I was under the assumption that biofuels are more expensive than fossil fuels. I'm imagining that the purchaser, final end user of the fuel, is going to purchase, deliberately purchase a biofuel. And I would hope that there is a economic incentive to do so. I don't know if the fuel dealers can provide an economic incentive, given that I also believe that biofuels are more expensive. But in return for that economic incentive from the end user, the fuel dealer would then receive the clean heat credits. I don't think without the buy-in, clean heat credits should be established or created. But I'll shut up there, and maybe Matt, if you are able to provide me with kind of the economics behind the biofuels.
I think it looks like Matt may have dropped off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with one concern I have is that if we allow fuel dealers and VGS to pipe in biofuels without knowledge or consent, and then request clean heat credits for that, it might undermine the goal of getting clean heat credits to, or excuse me, clean heat measures to low and moderate income folks. So in a prior meeting, I had said I thought it would be a good idea that no credits are awarded to fuel dealers or designated delivery agents. Nope. Obligated parties. There we go. Until they've met their obligations to low and moderate income. But let's provide a scenario where every Vermont gas resident throughout the state is getting a mix of biofuels, and perhaps that is enough to meet all their clean heat obligations. They wouldn't then need to provide any kind of measures for low and moderate income folks. So that's one concern I have with that. In addition to the
Pike, just to clarify, I believe that installed measures have to be part of the measure mix. So I don't think you can get out of obligations to not do any installed measures unless I'm misremembering the clean heat standard, the Act 18.
I think, yeah, and I don't have the language of the statute in front of me. I think it is highly promoted, but I don't think there's an actual obligation. But I could be wrong there.
Henry, do you happen to know that off the top of your head? I don't want to put you on the spot, but the department's usually a good resource.
Yeah, no problem. And for those that joined late, Henry Mock, Department of Public Service. I'm filling in for Ben today. I have the act in front of me here, and under, let's see, the annual registration category. 8124. See, D2. I can put in the chat, but there is a requirement that of the 16% for low income folks and 16% of low or moderate income folks, half of those measures have to come from installed clean heat measures that represent a capital investment in homes, and also have a estimated life of 10 years or more. So I'll put that in the chat, but there is, it's more than a suggestion. There's a requirement that some of those low income measures go in the form of installed measures.
So thanks, Henry. So yeah, I'm reading that as like you could go to the default delivery agent to sort of unload that obligation, but like you do have to pay one way or the other if you're an obligated party to make that happen. That's how I read that. So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind, that everybody is going to be involved in installed measures somehow.
Great.
And I just want to mention as well that we do have Matt back, and Pike, you posed a question to Matt concerning the mix of fuels and fossil fuels and biofuels. So I don't know if you want to restate that now that he's here.
Yeah, I was trying to get a better idea of, how prevalent the mixing of biofuels into the fossil fuel mix is currently happening. It was my understanding that biofuels were more expensive.
No, that's not accurate, and that's not with biodiesel. And it's
Okay,
also one of the problems why it's problematic if you restrict credits to, you don't allow these credits to flow through those of low income and moderate income, because this is the cheapest way that we can achieve our greenhouse gas emissions. And asking someone to install $12,000 worth of new stuff versus just receiving a lower carbon energy product that costs less seems to me the most important thing we can do as an equity advisory group to help low and moderate income Vermonters reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
so biofuel is cheaper. So fuel dealers could provide some kind of discount to fuel purchasers, and because of the discount, they could request that the clean heat credits go to the fuel dealers. Would that scenario make sense?
The scenario that makes sense is that the upstream suppliers blend higher blends of biodiesel into the heating oil. That capital investment is awarded with credits. Those credits then defer the obligation for the portion of the fuel that is not renewable.
Do you mind restating that one more time just for me, Matt, so that I can make sure I capture it?
The way that it's worked in other areas that have similar programs is that the credit is established by the entity that is the obligated party that makes the capital investment in changing their fleet and their tank. It defrays the cost of the fossil fuel that they will sell at diminishing amounts. That enables the clean heat fuels, renewable liquid fuels that do not require an investment by the consumer to be able for them to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, meet the Global Warming Solutions Act mandates at a comparable cost to using fossil fuels.
So one thing that I just wanted to, and I think this is almost a precursor, just figuring out sort of our feelings as a group about the obligation to, like, you know, Pike brought this up earlier or previously, inform people versus obtain consent. And I just want to figure out sort of what we're working with in terms of delivery, how delivery works and where we think we could kind of intercede in that model to promote equity.
Mia, if I may,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm off camera, but
Yeah.
the most important conversation with that is not just with biofuels, it's with installed products. Right now, the consent, we already have a model for this, in which consent is, so for instance, if you install a full climate heat pump today, that is incentivized. You're going to get, on some systems, you're going to get $350 off. Other systems, you'll get $450 off. That's not cash that you get in your pocket or a check that gets sent to you later. That's off your bill that is done by a heating contractor who gets it off their bill when they buy the piece of equipment from their supply warehouse, like a FW Web or a Granite Group or a Blodgett. And then they get a check. They aggregate those installations, and they get a check from Efficiency Vermont. So that's, and we heard very loud from the lobbyists from Efficiency Vermont that they own all the environmental attributes of that rebate. So consent is now flowing now from Efficiency Vermont to the supply warehouses through their contractors and then into the consumers. That flow of credits and the fact that the consumer and the contractor are cut out of it needs to be investigated fully.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think in our last group and in the full GREATRE group, the consensus was that we felt that the credits would be owned by the property owner, that in which the equipment was being installed. And, you know, for that to happen, I guess I think we should understand the logical extensions of that, but basically under that model, I assume that you'd have that Efficiency Vermont would need to obtain, sorry, Matt, can you mute? It's really loud. So I would assume that under that model, Efficiency Vermont would need to obtain the release of credits from the homeowner or anyone who is sort of offering financing and, you know, in exchange for the credits would need to obtain a release. I think we had agreed on that point. If there's something more we need to discuss, I hear you that like it doesn't exist in a vacuum, but I think that gets to it to an extent.
I just want to call everyone's attention to everyone that thinks that we have designed a system or supporting a system in which the consumer owns the credit, that the existing system in place now, of which the advocates that work for Efficiency Vermont have openly professed to on tape last week at the TAG meeting, which is they own it all. The consumer does not. That exists here. We've got an issue. If we think that we're passing something which the consumer owns the credit, we should know that the TAG is not working in that direction. The TAG is establishing that the entity that provides the upstream rebate is the entity that owns the the environmental attributes, and there go the credit.
Yeah, I think that's something we'll have to watch. Our proposal matches what the PUC staff have proposed, so I do think that seems like the most likely opinion to prevail, but it's certainly not guaranteed. So I think we'll have to watch that and see. I think opening the door to who finance something is quite a Pandora's box, because it's not just Efficiency Vermont in this space. There are other players. It gets messy if you try to sort of tie this to who sort of made this project happen, rather than a simple your property in which it's installed, you're the owner. But you know,
I absolutely agree. But here's the issue: if we are, as an
Sorry,
equity advisory group, saying that
Matt.
that the consumer owns the credit, but they do not, we need to point that out. If the emperor has no clothes, we need to point it out. That's our job as an equity advisory group.
And I just want to acknowledge that Shuni has his hand up as well.
So I think the perspective that Matt gave is helpful. I think it works in an environment where a contractor or a vendor already has an arrangement through Efficiency Vermont to access the customer who was approached Efficiency Vermont, that they are interested in implementing a project, and they already have a mechanism for processing that credit or rebate that Efficiency Vermont eventually accumulates as part of the state program. However, if you look at Inflation Reduction Act, for example, Inflation Reduction Act has got specific aspects of credit for installing heat pumps and other energy efficiency program, including insulation. So I'm not really sure whether all of that is managed today, all the credits and rebates available today are exclusively done through Efficiency Vermont and the vendors. So if I independently go and hired somebody to install a heat pump, maybe my understanding is not right about this, I would be able to go and get the federal tax credit or rebate on some of these energy efficient improvement programs. When we installed heat pump the first time 4 years ago, we got a direct check for the rebate and the program. It was not part of the processing bill. It didn't go. It wasn't processed through the vendor. So I just want to point out that I'm not really sure, how IRA scope would fit in this. Inflation reduction scope will fit in this. There are significant rebates and credits available for energy efficient program today. So I think our intent was by keeping the credit at the property owner, we empower the property owner to do the right thing. I think from an equity perspective, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it provides tremendous strength to the property owner, I believe.
Thank you. And I do just want to report the comment that Pike said just about Matt. We're having a little bit of difficulty hearing when you speak. So if there's a way that you can either speak closer to your mic or resolve some audio issues, might be helpful. I do want to take a quick temperature check. So we are about halfway through the allotted time. We do have I do have an extra 30 minutes that I can stay on, so I can stay on until around 2:30. But I wanted to check in to see if we feel like the conversation is moving in a productive way and what the objective we are looking for out of this meeting might be.
I haven't found it terribly productive yet. My goal is to, I guess, define who is the originating owner of clean heat credits for fuels.
Thank you, Pike. And Mia?
So yeah, I think in response to Pike's comment, I think we have solved this as a group. I think the AAG's as a full group's intent was clear, and we voted on that last time. I'd prefer that we don't sort of reopen issues that are fairly settled unless we really feel like there's a huge question mark next to them. I would really love us to, think about what we would need to do to respond to the PUC about clean heat ownership issues, credit ownership issues by May 7th, and make sure that we have something coming out of this meeting. So if we feel strongly that we need to weigh into what the straw proposal says about delivered measures or early action credits, which we haven't covered, this is the time to get that done.
And do you mind just repeating those last two? You said early, sorry, I missed.
I think early action credits and delivered measures are the two things that we haven't really come up with any consensus on.
Great. Okay. And does anyone else have either additional objectives for this meeting itself or additional thoughts on ways or items that we need to respond to the PUC about before May 7th? Yes.
Perhaps we didn't come to a consensus, but I thought
Sorry, Pike. I saw Shriram's hand first, and then I saw Henry's, and then we can go back to you.
So I guess I was just going to make a process suggestion. Is there a way to see the position that the technical advisory group has developed on this? As we have proposed a letter to PUC, is there any type of documentation or is there any type of communication that this group can review from the technical advisory group to be on the same page or start a dialogue on why, we have taken the position we have taken the position? I'm just trying to figure out how you work towards consensus or a common objective here.
I get the sense from what I've heard from Dominic that the tag is less far along than we are in ironing out its consensus. I'll note that we don't have to have consensus. We can sort of share our own opinion and let the PUC sort it out. But I agree with you that it would be good if we're all on the same page. I have talked to the tag chair, and he expressed some interest in getting our two subcommittees on credit issues together to talk about this.
Okay.
I can try to pursue that and see, what would work under our timeline. So let me get back to you all on that.
Okay, I think that will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. And Henry?
I just have a brief comment on installed measures before we move on. I'm not sure if now is a good time to just mention something that I think is significant.
Okay, before we dive straight into that, then I might go back over to Pike to see what he had to say, and then we can come back over to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting earlier. I had thought maybe we didn't come to consensus, but I had thought we had agreed that for early action credits, early action activity would be treated no differently than any later activity.
I think we talked about that as a group. It didn't, from a process standpoint, it wasn't in Ben's memo or part of our EAG discussion. So I didn't feel comfortable putting that into the memo. I think we could add that in. I think the group felt pretty well in alignment about it, but I'd like to hear strong consensus about it before we take it back to the group, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay, so that to me does sound like a potential decision point. And so I'm wondering if it makes sense to, I'm thinking it makes sense to go ahead and discuss this a little bit, and then we'll open it up to public comment to see if there's any additional thoughts on the early action piece. And then after that, then we'll come back over to you, Henry. Okay. So from the members of the subgroup, given what both Pike and Mia have said about the early action activity being treated no different than normal activity, does that sound like something that should be just added to the recommendations? Yes, Shriram.
I think that the way Pike said it, it sounds logical to me. So I would keep it simple. So I support that.
Great. And Mia?
So I completely agree in spirit. I think it's pretty sketchy, for lack of a better word, to, you know, say that like I this belonged to the credit owner, but I didn't actually have, or sorry, the property owner, but I didn't have to get their permission because it happened during this like interim period. So I agree in spirit. I am concerned about the logistics of going back and getting in touch with people and like getting a release after the fact. I don't know what you do with that. I quite frankly, like, I don't have a great solution to how you make that happen. I just think it's really questionable. And I'm also not sure like what people are currently doing to verify or confirm incomes for people. So that sounds like it's going to be just messy. I think we can acknowledge that, but I don't have an issue, you know, a suggestion. And I also agree with, you know, Pike and Srini that, yeah, the credits should belong to the homeowner even during this interim early action period.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mia. Pike?
Yeah, I would also add that, you know, for any measures that have occurred already, I think we're hard pressed to, at least I am, to believe that they were installed for the sole purpose or for the primary purpose of complying with the clean heat standard. You know, I got my heat pump before the clean heat standard was even proposed, and I think a lot of the credits or the measures that have been installed would have happened anyway, regardless. So if people don't get credit for them under this new statute, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Thank you, Pike. Anyone else have thoughts on this from the subgroup? Okay, so what it sounds like to me is we have a general thought on this piece, which is that the early action shouldn't be treated any differently, but there are concerns and there are caveats that maybe could also be added to any response that we give to the PUC, just to give them a more in-depth kind of look at it. I do want to take the moment to open it up to public comment for this specific piece on early action credits. If there's anybody who has anything that they'd like to say, and please keep in mind that we will have time later on in the agenda for general public comment as well. Great. So I've done my facilitator's task of counting to 10, so I'm going to assume that there's no public comment. And so then maybe we can take a quick vote just saying that this is something that we all agree upon and including in a response to the PUC. And I look to one of the subgroup members to make a motion on that.
Sure, do just to be on the right, as a motion, you know, like using that text. So I guess I'm going to make an attempt. I make a motion that the group consensus is that any installed measures during the early action period still belong to the property owner, but we will note the challenges with documenting such efforts. Does that motion is there a second on that?
I'll second that, Matt Coda.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, can we see hands for a vote on that? Is all in favor of that motion? Okay.
I'm in favor. I just wonder if it would be more simple to say that early actions are treated no differently than other eligible measures or something like that.
Let's see. I mean, I think it is a different, like it's a different environment. Like for instance, we are in our main comments to the PUC, we suggested that person obtaining the credits include all sorts of information, and that is pretty hard to do retroactively in terms of an informed. I mean, I guess you could. Sorry, I'm not trying to make this more complicated. I guess no differently seemed loaded to me, and I was trying to get this into a motion that us and the whole EAG could sign on to.
Okay. Well, I can support the motion as is.
Okay, thanks, Pike. So I think based on the hands I had before in the original motion, which I think still holds, the ayes have it. So if that's all in order, let's move on.
And Mia, do you just mind repeating it one more time so that I can capture it?
Okay, I'll try. Yeah.
I'll remember it.
So we made a motion that the opinion of this subgroup was that early action credits, I guess early action credits for installed measures would belong to the property owner in whose, I guess the owner of the property in whose, wow, sorry, okay. They belong to the owner of the property in which said measures are installed. However, we note the potential challenges of retroactively documenting these issues or these transactions. Okay. And I will, just for the benefit of the group, I can work with Ashira on cleaning this up and making sure that this is all in a form that's consumable for the full EAG group, so we can have consensus for the entire working group, or sorry, the entire EAG. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, let us move back to, so we still have the delivered measures to talk about, and then also we have Henry's point to go back to. So with that, I'll go back over to Henry. If you want to tell us, rephrase again the comment that you had brought up.
Thanks. Yeah. Just one note on installed measures before we move on. And I don't know if this needs to be included in the memo, but I haven't heard it discussed very much. And I brought it up in the tag breakout group on the topic, just that installed measures generate credits, presumably for the year that they're installed, but then also future years that they provide emissions reductions in place of whatever fuel they're replacing. So I think that is, in the interest of transparency, I could see a customer not being aware of that when they transact to transfer their credits. So I just wanted to flag that, I guess. And that's it.
Thank you, Henry. Does anybody have anything that they want to add to that, or any reactions?
So I don't have the specific citations right now, but there are studies that suggest that energy efficiency systems decrease over time. So there's Jevons paradox, where we have cheaper systems, we have more efficient systems, and thus we start using more of that very same thing we're trying to conserve. So I hope that installed measures, there's some kind of sunset over the amount of fuel over time that are accredited for clean heat credits, so that a clean heat pump doesn't always ad infinitum create clean heat credits, but say that over the next 5 years or 10 years and afterwards, assume that they're no more better than the fuel that they're replacing, because the studies that I've seen suggest that's the way they work.
Well, Ed, I think that that is part of the tag's work to figure out, what are the actual, expected energy savings to the extent that that's knowable.
Yeah, in theory, I haven't been able to follow the tag closely as closely as I wanted, but at least with respect to biomass, it looks like they're gonna tweak the system. So,
And Pike, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that? You said in terms of biomass, the tag is looking to tweak the system.
yeah, it's irrelevant to the topic at hand here, but while the tag is supposed to be doing certain things, I guess I don't have faith that they're going to do it correctly, is the more general comment. So, I think sunsetting any future clean heat credits for the replacement of fossil gas should be included.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on the installed measures piece? Then I'll go ahead and turn to the public as well, if there's any public comment on installed measure pieces. Dylan?
Yeah, hi everyone. Just wanted to make a comment on this, and it also relates to early action credits. Specifically, that I heard what was being said about ownership in the previous motion that was made about installed measures belong to the property owner. I just want to confirm that as it relates to installed measures, you're really talking about the credit is generated upon creation of the measure, that it would begin with the customer who is having the service installed, but that value could be transferred by agreement to other parties. And I think that's what you intend with what you've discussed. I just wanted to flag that's my understanding based on the preliminary guidance, and it sounds like that's what you've been discussing here. I also want to acknowledge that the Public Service Department has identified a point about the strip of credits that follows in installed measures, and they are indeed right that measure could generate credits into the future. And I think it's an interesting topic of discussion, and we'll look to the actual rules that are provided about how the credit values for the future could be estimated upon the initial completion of the measure, because credit values won't necessarily be known, particularly in the early action period. So welcome guidance on that as this group and others work on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Does anyone want to respond to that?
I can make an attempt. Yeah, I think, Dylan, the points you bring up are valid, and that's something we discussed a little bit in the last meeting. I'd encourage you to review the memo. I believe that's up on the website, in terms of what I communicated on behalf of the EAG, to the PUC and our sort of first round of credit ownership comments. We certainly grappled with the idea about like whether the value of a credit is knowable, or how it is knowable and when it is knowable. But I think our position was that if the PUC is relying heavily on this idea of homeowners being able to, or property owners, I should say, being able to negotiate and get value for their credits, they have to have as much information as possible to make that actionable. And I think it'll be up to the PUC to determine what a reasonable compromise is on that front. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so let's move back down to the point on delivered measures. Mia, I believe that you brought that up. If you'd like to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Ashira. So I think one thing that I, want to respond to this group's concerns and try to respond to what the PUC staff has said in the straw proposal. I think it's messy as it currently stands about who could get the credit in terms of something is initiated. I think there's a lot of gray area in that. And then one thing that Pike brought up was about getting consumer consent. The property owners or the person purchasing the fuels consent, which I agree with in spirit. I'm just not sure about the logistics of how you sort of how you would get the consent. I could envision a framework where every every month on my Vermont gas bill, for example, I'm a Vermont gas customer. Every month on my Vermont gas bill, I get a summary of what was, delivered to my home, which I could understand being complicated since it's a grid-wide thing, but I could understand that they could provide some information like we recommended in our memo about sort of credits generated through that activity, regardless of who owns them, just information about the credits. I think Pike's concern was about getting prior approval in the fuel that's delivered, in terms of having a mix of biofuels, what percentage. And, Pike, I'd welcome you to weigh in on it. I'm just not sure that this is going to be, logistically feasible to sort of get the customer to sign off. I mean, if I'm signing for a delivery when a propane truck comes up to my home, but I don't think it always works that way. So I don't know if you have thoughts, Pike, or ways that the group could address your concerns about customer consent, because I think it's important. I just think it's messy, for lack of a better word.
I think you get customer consent by providing some kind of financial incentive, suggesting, hey, we're delivering biofuel. We'd like to get clean heat credits for it, and we will knock off 5 cents per gallon or some such. If you sign this agreement. I think that's how you get consent. Otherwise, I think the IPCC has stated that you can't claim credit for things that are going to happen anyway. If trees are growing anyway, you can't claim credit for the amount of carbon they store. If fuel dealers or VGS are delivering these fuels anyway, no, they shouldn't be getting credit for them unless they have specific consent.
Right, but my point is, if you have a constantly fluctuating mix of fuel, like how do you keep me, the end customer, you, the end customer, looped into that agreement if every month that you get a delivery or continuously for Vermont gas, how do you sort of structure consent in that framework? That's what I want to be sure we're clear on.
So if there's a delivery every month, there's some kind of agreement that's already been formed between those two parties. In there it says, with our fuel delivery, we might include a variable amount of biofuel, which might create a variable amount of clean heat credits. And with your consent, we will provide a credit of such and such because of this variable amount of biofuel and variable amount of credit.
Srini, I see your hands up as well.
Yeah, so I think it could be very simple as it doesn't have to be a dynamic mechanism for giving credit. So let's say a utility provider is selling 100 units, and 20 of those units correspond to biofuels. And as a consumer, let's say that I am buying one of those 100 units of the utility fuel that's provided. At the end of the year, whatever represents 1% of the 20% blend as a credit, whatever is the commercially agreed mechanism for credit that comes to the consumer can be credited or it can be prorated and applied to the bill. It could, I mean, these type of things can be done in a very simple fashion. I'm sure, utility companies have all kinds of mechanisms for aggregating and tracking, what the consumer gets at the end of the day. So it could be as simple as the average consumption of the alternate biofuel was 20%, and the 20% credit, the pool of the credit is this dollar, and if you represent 1% of that total pool, then that's a prorated credit you get. So it could be a very simple mechanism. It doesn't have to be complicated.
I think an after the fact true up is an idea. I hadn't thought about that. I think it's possible. Now, in terms of fuel dealers with varying levels of sophistication in their system, it's not the easiest thing. Matt, I don't know if you're available right now, but again, I just think this would be helpful to have you weigh in on kind of what you think is possible in sort of existing frameworks. I'm just worried about like what's practical and what we could really hope to achieve. Oh, and sorry, Pike, I didn't realize you had your hand up.
Yeah, before we go to Matt. Yeah, Pike, did you just still have your hand up, or did you have something else that you wanted to mention?
No, I didn't take it down.
Okay, great. Okay. Matt, if you're there.
I'm here. I'm just endeavoring to go to a quieter spot in the State House.
No worries.
So I'm sorry. Can you frame the question one more time, Mia?
So we were just talking about ways that you could get, so the fuel mix that you could be delivering to a customer could change from month to month or even from day to day for Vermont Gas. And so we were basically trying to figure out, like Srini suggested that there could be a true up at the end of the year for like what you actually delivered to get, the customer. I don't want to put words in Srini's mouth, but either gain, consent to have those credits released from the customer, or at least inform the customer of like what happened at the end of the year. And my concerns are about sort of feasibility. I feel like you might want to weigh in on this.
Between a different methodology with how a vertically integrated company would distribute sustainably sourced biofuels, and how the dysphoria of all the different entities that are involved in moving a gallon of heating oil or propane throughout Vermont. And so the obligated party or the credit generator or the entity that makes the capital investment in a renewable liquid fuel, no end use customer at all.
We're having trouble hearing you again.
Let me get to us. I'll get to a better internet spot in 5 minutes. Hold
Okay,
on.
no worries. Okay.
I just wanted to clarify, and I think an after the fact true up prorated mechanism can be very simple to account for the whatever credit the customer needs to get by the choice that has been made by the fuel provider. So their life doesn't have to be complicated, saying, okay, I'm supplying 5% today, I'm supplying 10% tomorrow, 15% the next month. I mean, that's all, to get consent on all that stuff seems very messy and complicated. If they have been approved to provide an average blend through the year, then all they have to say is, yes, this is what we have provided, and this is your prorated credit based on what we have provided. So it could be a very simple mechanism.
Yeah, I agree with this last comment.
So the reality with delivered fuels, non-gas division or non-pipeline division, is that the investment is going to either come from the wholesale supplier, the in-state wholesale supplier, that's going to bring in renewable liquid fuels by train or by truck into a bulk storage facility. If they make that investment, they will earn those credits and defray the cost of their product versus straight fossil. This will incentivize the marketplace to move to more renewable fuels. that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That fuel will then be sold to a retail fuel company or an intermediary, and it will either be sold in Vermont or sold in another state. When that happens, the PUC's job is to track that carbon molecule from when it enters Vermont to where it is distributed and ensure that it is in fact supplies a Vermont home. But it could also come a different way. It could come from a fuel distributor in Albany, New York, who sells it to an entity that then transports it into Vermont, puts it in a different supply warehouse or tank system, and then is sold to a distributor who then sells it to another distributor, which eventually ends up to the consumer. The responsibility of those that sell fuel in or into Vermont is to register with the state once a year and describe in great detail how many gallons they sold, what type of fuel, who they sold it to, where they purchased it from, and whether that product was used for heat, hot water, cooking, or some other purpose, such as power generation. Any effort to create some sort of paper trail or sign-off program at the consumer level would make this very challenging to both implement and to audit.
Any thoughts from the subgroup members? Mia.
I think just taking it back to like a higher equity framework, what do we want for households? I mean, I think we, there's the whole point of the clean heat standard is to, get fewer greenhouse gas emissions, which is, presumably will be done with more biofuels. Okay, so that's one thing. In terms of, what the household could expect. I mean, when we talked about installed measures, there was a bit of a like, if the homeowner or the property owner knows something, they can use their knowledge to get a better deal and lower the cost and encourage them to install a heat pump or weatherize their home. If they know this information, they can shop around. I'm in terms of like the knowledge they're getting out of this transaction or the purchasing power they could get. I mean, I think Matt's basically saying they get cleaner fuels. That's a benefit. I guess I'm trying to frame whether we think that there is something we can or should do to make sure they get a benefit beyond that. Like, should they get cleaner fuels? Should they be able to negotiate among providers? I'm just trying to get a sense of like what our end goal is and what the means we could sort of ask the PUC to enforce to do that, because I'm just not clear about, the idea of shopping around on the market. I mean, I guess you could require fuel dealers to, give people a discount in exchange for their credits, but we've been dealing from this with a transaction standpoint and a contract standpoint in the installed measures. And I don't know whether that really translates here.
Yeah. So let me offer a more higher level, maybe a philosophical perspective on this. Look, at the end of the day, what Vermont is trying to do is reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If Vermont, whoever is the governing authority around this, apart from PUC, that determines that these biofuels are technically appropriate to be consumed in Vermont to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, then that's where it starts. The fuel dealers and the aggregators are providers of the service, and as we as consumers are the ones who are enabling to consume the fuel so that eventually Vermont can demonstrate greenhouse gas emission reductions. I think that's the setup here. So in that setup, I don't think there needs to be any room or discussion around, is the biofuel appropriate to be burnt in the first place? Or is that the right type of biofuel? Does it make sense? If the state and whoever is the governing authority of the alternate fuels, if they have deemed that these fuels are appropriate, they're appropriate. Now, so that's more of a philosophical perspective from my point of view. It's the same as saying, what's the difference between natural gas sourced from a fracking field versus an off-gas platform? Do the customers really care whether the natural gas is sourced from a fracking field versus an off-gas platform? I don't think so. So somebody has made a determination that that natural gas difference is appropriate for consumption by the consumer. So that's what I would like to offer, to say that if the biofuels are deemed appropriate, they're appropriate. Now, what is the consumer's part in enabling the fuel dealers and the Vermont governing agency in consuming this alternate fuel? I think that's the part we are talking about. So the consent, to me, the consent is more of an administrative process. The more meaty discussion is around what is the consumer's role in consuming the biofuel, and do they deserve any part of the biocredit or the credit that is attributed to the biofuel? If the state determines that the consumer has no monetary incentive to get that, that's a different story. If the state is supportive of the consumer getting a different incentive, part of the incentive, that's where I think some type of tracking mechanism based on average consumption or a true up would help. So I just wanted to make, I make a distinction between this consent and what is the role of the customer in consuming the biofuel. So.
Thank you. And I do want to point out that we have about a little less than 20 minutes left. And I do want to give time for just general public comment. And this would be general public comment on the topic of credit ownership. So we'll open it up for, we have about 10 minutes for that. And then after that, I'd like to start moving towards what type of product we want to come out of this conversation, and who might be able to take that on and move it forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. If anyone has anything that they'd like to say on the topic of credit ownership and the discussion that we've had this far. Dylan.
I'll just jump in, since the topic of credit ownership for renewable volumes of gas has come up, or alternative supply volumes. Just to restate, I think I've said this in a previous meeting, I don't recall which one, but we really have two types of alternative supply options available. We're fully regulated utility. One of those are volumes of biomethane renewable natural gas that are blended into our base portfolio. We have regulatory approval to do that. I do want to call out that volumes of biomethane renewable natural gas have been more expensive than traditional fossil gas. And so our regulators look at the climate benefit of those volumes, and they consider them in the context of traditional least cost planning, which is what we go through when we go through a rate case and other proceedings to ensure our customers are getting a good value for the dollars that they pay. All of that is fully regulated and permitted, and we undergo a lot of work to acquire that gas, to ensure that it's bundled, that it has a system of delivery to our pipeline, that it's injected there. This is all consistent with the requirements of Act 18 as it relates to alternative supply gas volumes. So that is spelled out in the law, Act 18, in our current regulatory structure, and we feel that the straw proposal on credit ownership for those volumes is actually very balanced and consistent with what's in the Act and what's in our regulatory proceedings, so we support it. I will say that we also have another class, which is those customers who opt into our voluntary volumes of biomethane renewable natural gas, which are available under an approved tariff. So customers can opt to do that. That's a very different set, and in the guidance, the commission, or I apologize, the straw proposal sets out a structure where perhaps the customer who has requested that voluntary volume retains some ownership for the credits. And we would just point out that we still play an essential role in acquiring those volumes of biomethane gas. And so what we would envision, we put this into comments that we've submitted, that we might work out some sort of a value sharing with those customers in our voluntary program. So that might be an option. I will discuss with our team this notion of some sort of disclosure to customers about volumes, but when a customer is agreeing to use our service, of course, they're accepting terms of service, and our entire process is regulated and public, so anyone can weigh in at any time. So I'll just put that on the table. Really appreciate your work, all that's going into this, and we'll tune in for the next EAG meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dylan. And before you go, I just wanted to clarify, you used we several times, and so I just wanted to make sure we knew who that we was.
Yeah, I'm here on behalf of VGS Vermont Gas, which has been referenced several times by participants here. We're the state's lone regulated gas utility.
Thank you so much. Okay, any other public comment? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. And then with that, let's start circling back to what product is coming out of this. So it looks like we've made at least one decision, which is on the early action credits. And so we have 1 point of consensus with a couple of noted concerns. It looks like we may be coming towards consensus on the delivered measures, but I do also want to point out that it is not necessary that we have consensus on these. I think that it's more if we can highlight the things that we all agree on, the points that we all agree on, and then provide that to the PUC, but also if there are things that we still have concerns about, things that are still differing opinions, we can also list those concerns separately. So yes, I guess my question is, are there things in this delivered measures section that we think that we all agree on? And if anybody from the subgroup can identify those.
I will just note that in our first memo, we did say that we wanted information about the same information delivered measures transmitted to the customer as installed measures. So that is in the memo that the PUC already has. So I would consider that again settled unless there are questions. So I think that area of consensus has already been identified.
Great. Shriram?
So I think the technical complexity of delivered fuels, I think is much higher compared to installed measures from my perspective. So it'll be good to see TAG's position on this and what they are recommending based on their assessment of the landscape. I think it would be helpful before I mean, I don't really have a good understanding of how big a problem are we trying to tackle here on the delivered fuel. So maybe it'll be good to see TAG's position first on this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on the technical advisory group. My opinion on the AG and the TAG doesn't change when it comes to credit ownership on delivered fuels. And we haven't reached a conclusion, but I suspect we will at the next meeting. But we haven't even reached a conclusion regarding installed measures because of the complication that came up last week regarding the fact that the ownership of all environmental attributes is already being claimed, and what that means for individuals that make a decision to install a piece of equipment that looks like it receives credits.
Well, Matt, if you could update us in the full EAG meeting about any developments on that. Oh wait, we're meeting before the next tag meeting, right? Yes.
Yes, we meet on
So-
Tuesdays, they meet on Thursday.
Okay, that won't be resolved, but as I promised, I will see what we can do before the May 7th deadline to meet with the tag subgroup one-on-one. So we'll follow up on that.
Great. So then just moving into, I guess, more of the logistic piece, is there anybody who would be willing to kind of carry this forward as I go ahead and make this a static document? If there's anyone who's able to go through and pull out some of the themes and some of the questions that we still have.
I'm happy to do that since I'm submitting the other memo to the PUC anyways. I can create something for the full group. Just to be clear, the consensus I'm getting is on early action credits for installed measures. I think we have consensus on that. And I think we have some questions that we can bring to the full group. I'm not hearing any action items or I guess points of firm agreement to bring to the group besides that early action issue. So I would assume that our discussion in the full EAG group on Tuesday would mostly focus on outstanding questions and ask the group what they think. Does that sound what we've covered?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, yeah.
And I'll just add, I think it would be good to think about what this group could do going forward. On Tuesday, we're going to discuss our outline for the final report. Credit ownership is obviously going to play a prominent part in it. You know, we'll have to see. You know, I had envisioned this subgroup continuing to work past the May 7th deadline on outstanding credit ownership issues. But let's keep that in mind where you see our energy on this issue in particular needing to go going forward.
Good. Okay, with that, if there's no additional comment or input, happy to move forward. So the action items for this are basically, I will go ahead and close the live document, and I can go ahead and do that now. And I'll hand it over to Mia, who will pull out any points of consensus that we've made, as well as any outstanding questions, and we will address those during next Tuesday's EAG meeting.
Great, thanks, Ashira. I'll do what I can to have that ready for the full group to take a look at. Okay, so if there are no other outstanding issues, anything from the group? Okay, hearing none, I will call this subgroup meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye, everyone.
you.